Welcome back to another episode of Archie's Sonic Character Files as we explore the histories of the inhabitants on planet Mobius. In this episode, we take a look at the history of the mischievous mage known as Wendy Naugus, along with her minions, the Witchcarters. Well, it's October, and since I'm still planning out the next main character to talk about in this series, I felt like covering a few characters for the Halloween season. And coincidentally, this will be another episode where I'm covering characters that originated from the games, and are characters that only exist in Archie Sonic's new timeline. Wendy Naugus made her first appearance in issue 276, giving us a glimpse of Wendy and her brother Naugus being successful in taking over Robotnik's theme park facility. We will be seeing more of her in the Sonic Universe story arc, Eggman's Dozen. First, we'll start off with the earliest history for Wendy. During the events of the 8-bit version of Sonic 2, Robotnik senses that the Naugus twins are close, so he quickly releases Tails to throw off Sonic and tries to escape, only to be trapped in Crystal by the evil wizards, with Sonic getting caught in the process. Tails begins his quest to rescue Sonic, while Wendy sends out her goons, known as the Witchcarters, to stop him. In the end, Tails defeated Wendy and her goons and manages to rescue Sonic. Back in the present time, Robotnik investigates his Eggman Land facility covered in crystals, and unable to order his badniks around thanks to the crystallized magic. He is soon spotted by the Witchcarters, Berenger the Grizzly, Falke-wulf, and Karatea the Rabbit, Wendy's goons who are now powered up by Dark Gaia energy and are more dangerous than ever. After avoiding the more powerful squad and the wizards, Metal Sonic is captured by their crystal magic, and Robotnik makes a hasty retreat to strategize a plan to take back his facility. The Witchcarters put up quite the battle against Conquering Storm and Mordred Hood, but once the generators were shut down, the Witchcarters lost their Dark Gaia energy, and Mordred was able to use his Vertigo Inducers to break them out of Wendy's mind control. Now free of Wendy's magic, Berenger, Falk, and Karatea are gonna give that old witch a piece of their minds. Meanwhile, Wendy and Naugus are at the center of the facility, where Naugus attempts to regain his dark magic. Wendy has chuckle when Naugus mistakes the Dark Gaia energy as Exus energy, but her joy is cut short when Robotnik and his army arrives to finish them off. Even so, she still has the upper hand on the battle. She gets her Witchcarters back under her control, and summons Metal Sonic, now covered in crystal magic and dubbed as Crystal Sonic. After a long battle, Naugus flees, the Witchcarters are defeated, and Wendy is held captive by Clove the Pronghorn. The witch pleads Robotnik to spare her and offers to help him in finding ancient relics, and Robotnik decides to let her join the Egg Army, as having an expert in magic could be useful to him. Her first mission is to find a cacophonic conch, as Robotnik has plans to utilize its power to control a certain race of creatures from another planet. The last time we would see Wendy would be in issue 283, where Robotnik instructs her to send her Witchcarters to Castle Acorn, and the last we would see of Berenger, Falk, and Karatea would be in the next few issues. The Witchcarters are teamed up with Team Hooligan, Metal Sonic, and an army of badniks for a full-on frontal assault on Castle Acorn to steal the Chaos Emeralds and Gaia Keys. They had their hands full in giving Gemerl a hard time, and despite being successful with their heist, they did get some beatings thanks to Cream the Rabbit, Cheese the Chow, and Big the Cat, before retreating back to the Eggman Empire. And that concludes the history of Wendy Naugus and the Witchcarters. Just another example of utilizing obscure characters from the games in the comics. The Archie Sonic version of Wendy is interesting, especially with how she's Naugus' sister. This does go against the whole Sega mandate in the new canon over game characters not allowed to have relatives, but my theory is that this was more geared towards game characters that were still active, so really obscure ones like Witchcard and the others, anything goes for them. And since the manual to Tails Sky Patrol mentions that Witchcard has the power to turn things into crystals, it makes sense being with Naugus, as that wizard has had some past with crystals. I do find her entertaining, having some sibling quarrels with Naugus and flirting with Robotnik. Looks like Thunderbolt's got some competition. Although I have this nagging feeling that she was featured as a replacement for the Iron Queen from the old canon. I mean, both of them have a similar cackle, and they both end up joining Robotnik near the end of their runs. Despite being related to Naugus, her full name is Wendy Witchcart Naugus. Apparently this was some kind of misconception that in the game she was called Wendy Witchcard, but in actuality she's only referred to as just Witchcart. Not sure where that originated from, but either way it's kind of similar to what happened with Silver Sonic, a character from the games that ended up having a different name in Archie Sonic. The only downside to Wendy is that, outside of a limited appearance thanks to the new canon's short run, we don't get to see much of her during the flashbacks that adapted the story to Tails Sky Patrol in the comics. That was always a pet peeve of mine in Archie Sonic's new canon. They feature flashbacks to past events where they adapted the stories to certain Sonic games, while we never see a full, fleshed out adaptation. I would have loved to see some visuals of young Tails going up against Wendy and her minions, rather than just leaving it as a, oh, play the game and see how the story ends kind of thing. Especially since this is coming from a Game Gear game with very limited ports, because we all know how Sega likes to pretend that the Sonic Game Gear games never existed. One final thing to note about Wendy is her first mission for Robotnik was finding that conch. Yeah, it's funny that Wendy, of all characters, was meant to be the one that would kickstart the whole Sonic Lost World adaptation in Archie Sonic. We do get a small tease of Lost Hex in Wendy's introduction, and she later mentions the Zeddy, but since the comics were cancelled right after they finished their Sonic Unleashed adaptation, we never got an adaptation on Lost World. Kind of a shame, really. Maybe Archie Sonic's version could have been better, you know, explore more of Lost Hex, and maybe give the Deadly Six more interesting personalities. And maybe Tails would have been more in character, instead of being an egotistical twat like how he was in the Sonic Lost World game. As for her minions, it's nice to see a more modern take on Berenger, Falke, and Karatea. Berenger is the power type, always ready to destroy things, Falke is the hyperactive wolf, and Karatea is the loopy one who can still be a dangerous threat. It must have been an interesting process in reintroducing these characters to a new audience, since they didn't have much of a personality in Tails Sky Patrol, let alone any official concept art from the game. Just the sprites, the box art, and that's it. So there are some noticeable changes. Berenger is now a brown bear instead of a black bear, Karatea has a new wardrobe but still being a white rabbit, and instead of focke-wulf, the character is called falke-wulf. I suppose they changed it because the original name sounded too much like fuck, but then again the new name just makes you want to say falken-wulf, which is funny because falk is actually the German word for falcon. Nowadays, the Sonic Encyclopedia changed his name to Hawk-Wulf. Yeah, poor guy just can't catch a break. And of course their flying machines are replaced by extreme gear from the Sonic Riders series to go along with their more modern designs, but they still add in some nice little details to reference their original flying devices. The interesting thing about these characters is that they were all under some mind control by Wendy. It is mentioned that this power is effective on weak-minded creatures, and we only get a small glimpse of this where we see that they're not a fan of the witch putting them under a spell. It does raise a lot of questions. Did these three Mobians act the same before as they do now? Were they originally good guys before Wendy changed them? Did her magic have some kind of effect on their mental minds? Like Karatea was originally the more serious one, and then Wendy's magic changed her into being more loopy and more carefree? It's quite a mystery. I do like the idea of these three being victims of dark magic. It's a real shame we never got to see their personal lives explored more. Archie Sonic may have been the one and only time we would see these characters from Tails Sky Patrol be brought back from the dead, but it looks like old Witchy is coming back with that upcoming Tails 30th Anniversary special that IDW is making for the IDW Sonic comics. I wonder if her minions will be in this special as well. I mean, we already got Wolfie making a cameo in that one story from the Sonic 30th Anniversary special. Yeah, which is kind of funny now that I think about it. First, Wolfie shows up in the Sonic 30th Anniversary special, and then Witchy shows up in the Tails 30th Anniversary special. If the other two don't show up and we get a Knuckles 30th Anniversary special, then I imagine they'll show up in that special. But either way, it's nice to know that Archie Sonic isn't the only official Sonic media that's helping to keep these characters alive. Well, that wraps up this character file, so until then, I got a juice! Falke-wulf!